Well, hi there folks. My FPV journey continues. If you got to the end of part 2, you will have seen that my Bixler here had the flight controller installed, obviously receiver there, very tight fit, but I managed to get it all in there in the end, and it was ready for a test flight. So if you want to see how that goes, stay tuned, but I'll give you a quick recap on my journey so far. First idea was to use one of my many Lidls. This was my number 14 Lidl cheapie conversion, and all the build blogs are on my channel. I built it lightweight with the idea of using it for FPV. It flew well, but I decided that a prop on the nose wasn't ideal for an FPV aircraft, so I converted it to a pusher. First test flights were pretty bad, but after I changed the thrust angle, it flew really well. But pretty soon occurred to me that there was no way you were going to get a flight controller and a receiver and a LiPo plus FPV gear in something this small. So came up with the idea of my Bixler, which is a lovely flying machine, will almost fly itself, and I thought that was for beginner FPV, that was a good idea. Of course, you could ask the question, why have a flight controller? Well, advice I received was pretty essential if you want to fly FPV, because if you lose sight of the model while you've got goggles on, chances are you're going to lose it because you'll have trouble spotting it in the sky again. In fact, I had a similar experience when I was testing my FPV transmitter. So decided on the SpeedyBee F405 wing, which is tiny, but all the same, as I said, was a tight fit. But we finally got a break in the weather, managed to get a couple of days up at the strip to see whether my loiter, which was one of the essentials I decided on, and I've now realised that what I really wanted was return to home, wanted a test to see if the flight controller was doing its job. True confession, I ended up taking 3 trips up to the strip because the first 2, for various reasons, were a total fail, but more of that in a bit. Let's get up to the strip. Well, the moment has come. Not many people up here. One guy doing a bit of ground handling with the paraglider, but there's the model, it's ready to go. And one thing I did add was my little scoops there, which I'm rather chuffed about. So for starters, let's see how the trim's like before I venture into using loiter. Whoa, I've got it 2 nose heavy. 2 nose heavy. I gave it a little bit of up trim on the elevator just to make sure. Nope, fuck that, man. So these were the tests on day 1, and that continued for 3 or 4 hours with myself and my willing helper there trying all kinds of things. It looked like it was tail heavy, it looked like it was nose heavy. We tried everything, and no matter what we did, even hand launching, it just dived into the scrub. Fortunately, after 3 or 4 hours of this, my mate noticed as I was handling the model that as I was pointing the nose up, the elevator was actually correspondingly going downwards, and it kind of became apparent that self-stabilisation, which I didn't even know operated on this because I've only got 2 modes set, somewhere along the line the self-stabilisation, as the nose came up, it was pushing the plane down, so there was no chance it was going to get off the ground. Back at the ranch I figured what the problem was. Now when you set these things up, I knew that you shouldn't do any tuning on the transmitter. But one thing I had found was I was still using my old Bixler channel, and a couple of the servos were reversed on the transmitter. Now that was the cause of the problem, because if you look in settings here, of course what I'd done, instead of reversing it in Inav, reversing it on the transmitter meant Inav still thought the stabilisation was working this way and this way, when in fact it was working that way and that way. Anyway, sorted that, switched off the servos on the transmitter, changed the servo direction in Inav, and it was time for day 2 up there. Oh well, another massive fail with my Bixler. This time it wouldn't arm, and as far as I know, I haven't changed anything that were plugged in. What I had to do was switch some servos and actually physically switch some leads here. But it won't arm. The app won't actually connect on Bluetooth on my phone,
and what's happening is when I try and arm it, it's saying it's not got enough satellites, which what it actually probably means is the port that the GPS is plugged into and the port that the Bluetooth connection is plugged into aren't enabled at the moment, so I'm going to have to give up on that one.
So somewhere along the line in Inav, where I'd changed the configuration of the servos, I'd also changed some other configurations, hence I had to go back to square one in Inav, and I told you it was a big learning curve. Had to go back to square one and set it all up again. That led me to day 3.
Right folks, well, we're up here again. Not a soul, very cold and a bit windy to be honest, but it's the 3rd attempt at testing whether my SpeedyBee 405 wing and the Bixler is going to do what it's supposed to do and return to home. Well, loiter in fact is the thing. This is the 3rd attempt. First time I came up, couldn't get off the ground, discovered afterwards that stabilization was correcting the wrong way, so as I was trying to pull up, it was pulling it down. Second time I came up, having sorted that, I thought, and it wouldn't arm because somewhere along the line, changing the first problem, all the configuration settings had gone. But I'm here today. Oh, and yesterday couldn't even get any satellites. Well, I'm here today and I've got 13 satellites showing on this, so I'm confident it's going to arm. And my plan is take off that way, come round this way a bit because it's not very user friendly if it goes down over that side. Come round this way a bit, get out to that line of trees there, and then hit return to home and see what happens. So please wish me luck. I'm very, very nervous. So first off, is it going to arm? Nothing's beeping. Prop is turning. Problem I've got here is it's a bit bumpy and doesn't like taking off on rough ground, but it's quite breezy, so I think with a bit of luck might go. Check my control surfaces are going the right way. Yes, they are. She's flying. That's a good sign. She's flying nicely. Get some height. Up there. Return to home. Oh, look at that. Return to home. It's coming back. Well, it's loitering. But it's not actually loitering over me. It didn't return to home, did it? Let's see what happens if I hit loiter here. That's what happens when I hit loiter. It is pretty breezy, so the wind's trying to take it down. The wind's trying to carry it off that way. I hit loiter. Let's see what happens. I'll leave it running for a bit. Is it eventually going to come back home? That's better. Well, it's correcting, but it's not loitering over me, is it? It's not loitering over me. I've ascertained a couple of things here anyway. If I turn off loiter, I have control again, which is what I was worried about. So I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to turn off loiter. So I now have control. I'm going to bring it overhead and hit loiter. And I had 13 satellites. That's half throttle anyway, and it's behaving quite nicely. Maybe this strong wind is confusing it. When it's in loiter, it controls the throttle. I have control. I'm going to land. Quite a strong headwind. I think I'll call that a moderate success because it did loiter. I'd like to try it when there's less wind because it's quite strong down here, and I'm sure up at 100 feet it's even stronger. But at least it flew. Let me just see what the battery level's like. But I've got 11.5. Well, I might have another quick flight, but I'm going to do that off camera and say goodbye from here at the moment. And next job I'm going to do is sort out which video camera and transmitter I'm going to put on.
So here we are back at the ranch, and I've sorted out one or two things. As you saw there, I mistakenly thought that in loiter mode the model would actually return to home and then loiter. I was totally wrong with that. In fact, it loiters wherever you are when you flick the switch. Plus, I've also sorted out, even more importantly, because I've only got 6 channels on my receiver and 6 channels on my transmitter, and 4 of those are in use for flight controls, I thought I could only have 2 other modes, hence arm on that switch, and I had loiter on that switch. Well, I've since discovered how in Inav you can use a 3-way switch. I'll show you on my computer screen here. You actually set the range that the switch works in Inav. So the range for the first part of the selection of the C switch on FlySky i6 is loiter now, and when I flick to bottom position, as you can see here on my computer screen, it's now in the range for return to home. Still not quite sure what return home does. I certainly don't want it to return to home and land. There's loads of stuff on this on the net. What I'm hoping is if I lose sight of it or it gets out of control, I can return to home and then flick it back once it's overhead to loiter, or even off, and then take control again. So I'm pleased I've sorted that, and all in all I think it was a pretty successful test flight. So after my next test, where I figure or check if return to home actually does work, I've actually sorted out already 2 cameras I plan to use for the next flight, which will have a camera on board. There's this little one here which has a camera but does not record. That's going to be the first one. And this will be the second one, which has this great little Firefly, can't even say it, Q6 video camera on it. Back in the good old days I used to get lots of cameras free from Firefly for test, so I've still got those. This records in 1080, which is a nice resolution. It's actually got EIS as well, and both of those are self-powered, which saves any complications about interference. They're self-powered by their own little 2S tucked in there. I think it's a 300, whatever, tucked in there. The other important thing, of course, is centre of gravity. Now when this is on there, balances nicely pretty much on the centre of gravity, which is pretty much where the spar is. But when the cameras aren't in there, I've got to put this fairly hefty chunk of ball bearing, what is it, 40 grams, in the nose here. So if I fly it as a free flying model, I've got to slip that in, which is easy enough. I just peel off this tape. So I'm all ready for test number 4. Stay tuned if you want to see that, or why not, if you've enjoyed this, give it a like and hit the old subscribe button. As far as receivers go, on test number 4, it'll be this little one here, which is a great little receiver. It was about £20 when I bought it. They're now 30. I'll put a link to that below. And I can separate the screen and use it in my homemade goggles. Or alternatively, I've actually got some goggles way back that I bought, pretty cheap and cheerful, from Eachine. Pretty cheap, as I say, but not great resolution, and they're not. It doesn't appear to be a very good receiver. But I'm going to test. Once I've got it in loiter, I can test all of this stuff quite happily to know that I can afford to look at this and know the model is still flying where I left it, which is the whole idea of loiter. So if I'm happy with how it goes, I'm actually going to spend some money on some decent goggles. I've seen some Eachines, £60 or £70, that I think will be a step up from this. So anyway, all in all, the journey continues, but I would say I'm 90% there. And as I say, if you'd like to see how I get on part 4, with some video from this and flying proper FPV, hit the old subscribe button down there. But thanks for watching. I'll stop waffling on. We've got strong winds for another week, so this isn't going to happen for a while, but step by step I'm getting there slowly. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll catch you all again soon. Bye for now.